Hello, kids. Most of you are staying home and are probably getting a little bit bored and antsy, all cupped up in the house. I know that if you want to go outside, a lot of neighborhoods have a cute bear hunt in the community. Very fun. But while you're outside, you might also want to look at some real life animals like birds. Um, when you go outside in your yards, the streets, the park, the river, you can see and hear lots of birds. There's a scientific name for somebody who watches and studies birds, and it's called ornithologist. Here is the word, ornithologist. And my name is Sietske Johnson. I'm a teaching artist, and I love to connect art projects with other stuff that students have to learn about, like science and math, history, and geography. And this project that I'm sharing with you today will do just that. We are looking at biology, we're looking at drawing from observation, like science people like to do, and a little art history. Did you know that there was a famous American artist named John James Audubon? Here is his name, John James Audubon, who observed and drew birds in the 1800s, a long time ago. His most well-known book with illustrations of birds in it, in their habitat, that's the place where animals live and thrive, is called The Birds of America, published in 1827. He painted his birds life-size in a natural surrounding like the woods, the fields, the beaches, and sometimes including what they ate and their nests and all kind of other interesting facts. Actually, there's a famous bird conservation society in America and in the whole world actually, and it's named after him, the National Audubon Society. Check them out online. And then you can see all they do. And online you can also find lots of pictures of birds from John James Audubon. So scientists like to observe things closely, looking at the details to understand the bigger picture. And artists do actually the same thing. But sometimes they like to put their own spin on things. And we will do that as well. We will make an artwork with an unusual medium. Medium means art materials, and we will use coffee instead of paint, pencils, or markers. Painting with coffee will, of course, not give you the chance to show the real colors of the birds, but will create a monochromatic, that means in one color, monochromatic painting with different values of brown. Value means the darkness or the lightness of a color. Think of it as a black and white picture or a copy of something, almost a little bit like the old-timey photos with browns that's called sepias. So you can observe and paint whatever bird you would like, even a fantasy bird, but my example will be of a chickadee. Chickadee because I love that cute name. Plus, it has lots of varieties of values. So, and then when we're done, you can glue some sticks around your picture to make it like a very nature-y frame. Very cool. If you want to follow along with the chickadee, I want you to look at a picture or the real live bird if you notice him, and notice how the head is connected to the body. Not with a long skinny neck like a swan, or how small the beak is, unlike a duck. I want you to notice exactly where the eye or the eyes are, how its short legs are sort of like sunken into the body when it sits, unlike a flamingo. I want you to notice the size of the tail and the black spots, the little cap on top of the head and the throat. Okay. Let's start. To start, I taped a piece of watercolor paper on a piece of cardboard. You can also tape it to the table. Actually, I like to work flat on the table with watercolor and coffee because then you will not have any issues with dripping paint. But for this movie, I'll have it on the easel so you can see it. painting with coffee is sort of like painting with watercolor. Both mediums use water to thin things out. Thin out the pigments. The pigments we are using is Nescafe instant coffee. That's like crumbs of dry crumbs of something, and I put them out on a plate, and then you just add some water or already brewed coffee to make it liquid and to be able to paint with them, right? I'm gonna start painting with some leftover coffee from the coffee pot from this morning. This will have a very light value, and when you start painting with it, it may be hard to see in the picture. I will try and get you a close-up, but that's good. It's almost like a sketch. You will notice that I will not draw with the pencil first because I really do not like pencil lines showing in a finished painting. So we're going to be starting with the body, and for it you paint about the size of an egg, also the shape of an egg in the middle of your picture, and then for the head you add a little bump to the top like a ping pong ball, but make sure you don't have a neck showing. So here, can you guys see that? Yeah. We'll put a little egg, and then the head we just add to it like that. That's all we do for now. If you make a mistake in this, you can almost like erase it with a piece of paper towel. That's the wonderful part about it. You have to let this dry, because if you paint another layer on top, you know what happens to watercolors when you paint wet next to wet or wet on wet, it'll blur together and the layers will disappear and it will all fall in the same shape. So we don't want to do that. It has to dry first. And luckily, a very thin layer like that will dry pretty quick. So we should be good to go on to the next one. Now you make a darker value by adding some liquid to the little crumbs of the coffee. And you mix it around a little bit. If you need to add a little bit more water on your brush, you can do that until you have a darker value. You can try that out. So here is the darker value, whereas the regular coffee was here. Can you see the difference? Very light and a medium brown. So we're going to now work with the medium brown and add a layer on top where the cap of the little bird is. And then here comes the throat, just like a triangle. Here is actually the eye. And I'm going to use a Q-tip to take it out so that you can really see it and you know where the eye is going to be. The eye, of course, is going to be very dark, but we'll do that later in the next layer. We can add the tiny little beak, and then we add some values for, here's a dark area that's almost like a triangle. Here's the wings that are folded. He's not flying, so this is how you will show that. And then the tail is right here, about the size of the body. Not too big. Fluffing out a little bit at the end or in a V. Remember we talked about the legs? That the legs are kind of sunken in the body. You only see a little bit sticking out. And then here come the toes. We're going to put the bird on a branch, but you will not see the whole leg. You only see this. And then we're going to add the branch right over the legs. And here comes the rest of the branch. You can paint right over the legs because we're going to add another layer on that anyway. Okay, now we have to wait till this layer dries again. Of course, you can use a paper towel and a Q-tip. If you have to, you can add a little bit of water on it to really erase an area that you are not happy with. So, that option is always there. Even if you had to, you could scrub the whole paper clean. But of course, then the paper is wet and you will have to dry until it's completely, wait till it's completely dry before you start painting again. Okay, now we're going to make the darkest value, adding more of the crumbs onto your plate, the palette, right, as artists call that. And when you have a nice, really dark value, and this has dried, we're going to add another layer definitely here on the cap. There's a little line that goes back here. Here is a clear, darker area. This is going to be a little stripy for the wings, the feathers that are folded over the back because he's not flying, and the tail. Now we can also go back over these toes that are grabbing onto the branch. And there you go. Now the real cute thing is I'm going to get a whole crumb of coffee and put it right in the eye, and it will melt right on there. Because of the background was kind of wet. Do you see it already looking sort of coming together? Now we're going to add one more layer when this layer is dry and make the head a little bit darker still, and that one here too. Oh, this triangle actually goes all the way until the throat. Here we need some more darker lines in there. And it doesn't have to be exactly like it, but we would like to. And oh, you can also add a little bit of texture in the branch for the bark. You see how that comes together like that. All right, now that will have to dry again, and then you can see if you need to add another layer. What you can do in the meantime is add some background. Now the background, you can just use a big brush and get like the medium brown value that you had, or you can use a sponge, or even some bubble wrap, or fingers to give it some nice interesting textures on the for the foliage, because this bird might be living in the woods, right? Or sitting on a branch in the woods. You paint over the whole thing, but don't come too close to the bird. Leave a little white layer. That's all good. If you go too close to the bird, the colors will melt together again, and you don't really want that, because then your whole nice shape of the bird will disappear and blur away in the background. Okay, so you see how I leave a little white layer around the bird? And that's okay, that looks very artsy. Now to give it a little bit of texture, I'm gonna add some of that with a sponge. You see how now it looks almost like it's in a deep forest with trees and leaves and foliage all in the background. If it wasn't all the way dry, it will blur away. You may have to go give that another layer, but it can be kind of painterly. It doesn't have to be all perfect. And don't overdo that, because then you will not recognize them anymore, the textures, and it will all melt together again. So that's good as well. Don't worry about that. All right, now it needs to completely dry before you sign your name. Otherwise, the letters that you paint will melt away again. That has happened a lot to me because I want to sign it too quickly. But here I kind of have a drier area, and I'm going to try and sign my name right here. Oh, still a little bit wet. If that happens, you know what we do? We just turn that into some foliage as well. No worries, no worries. find another spot to paint. Your name. Yeah, way better. We need a little bit more liquid. If it's too hard to paint your name with the brush, of course you can do this later with a marker as well. No worries. And then for the really fun part, I like to add some splattering to the top. Gives it that artsy, handmade look. And I probably will have to do this flat, otherwise the splatters will, but I'll show you when it's done. Do you see the little splatters that make it look very artsy and, well, make you look like an artist. Okay, the next step, the last step. You take down the tape and you notice the nice white border around your artwork, almost like a mat. And that looks very neat. And then there you can glue on your sticks. You can use regular glue, but you have to wait a long time for it to dry. Or you can use hot glue gun, but ask your parents to help you with